Big trade deal between the United States and Europe announced yesterday. What does it all mean for Canada? Where could our critical conversations with the Trump government go before the August 1st deadline? It's coming up fast. It's this Friday. To help break it all down, we're joined by Joseph Steinberg, an economist at the University of Toronto. Joseph, great to have you back on the program.
Yeah, great to see you again. Thanks for having me as always.
Joseph, we're seeming to see a bit of a pattern here. Indonesia, Japan, the European community, they all have agreed to, in a sense, a flat tariff ranging from 15 to 20%. This seems to become table stakes in Trump's negotiations with his trading partners. What do you make of it all? Is this something that Canada might well have to contemplate?
It's certainly possible. Based on what I know and based on what I've heard, I think it's unlikely, at least for the short to medium term. Everything that we've heard come out of the Trump White House so far about kind of the worst case scenario for us on August 1st, if no deal is secured, we get hit with 35% tariffs instead of 25% tariffs, which is where we're at now. But everything that I've heard indicates that the exemption for USMCA compliant trade product exports will still be on the table for us. And so right now, the vast majority of our trade with the United States already complies with the USMCA. The back of the envelope calculations indicate that just about 90% of what we're sending down south is compliant and actually exempt from tariffs altogether currently. If that holds, going from 25 to 35% for the exports that are not compliant, that remaining 10%, to be quite honest, it's not that big of a deal, especially when the vast majority of those non-compliant products are already getting hit with even higher tariffs of 50%. That's the steel and aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
Those sectoral tariffs are separate from all these deals and negotiations anyway.
Mm-hmm. But Joseph, we're seeing again a pattern here, a pattern where, especially with Japan and Europe, these are large trading partners of the United States. Senior White House economic advisors like Stephen Mirren, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury and of Commerce have all indicated that tariffs are an important part of how this Trump administration is looking at the United States debt and deficit position. It's not a good one. They are seeing these tariffs as a revenue generating tool. It effectively is a tax, Joseph. It's maybe the one tax that Americans will actually happily pay. So how I don't know, confident should we be that when the president says, I want to renegotiate CUSMA, I want to renegotiate NAFTA, that whether it's August 1st or 2025 or August 1st, 2026, we aren't going to see some kind of flat tax, flat tariff applied to Canadian goods coming into the United States?
Yeah, and that's certainly down the road when it comes to renegotiating the existing free trade agreement. It's possible that we won't end up with the free trade agreement, rather an agreement that involves some level of tariffs above zero on all of our exports. Again, I would be cautious, about predicting that. Again, based on everything I've heard so far indicates that the exemption is going to be maintained. I guess the other thing to look at with all of this is, Canada is different than these other countries and regions that you've mentioned in that the United States doesn't have a free trade agreement with the EU, with Japan,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Um, and so these deals that President has made so far involve countries that didn't already have pre-existing free trade agreements with the US. And I think that's important because those free trade agreements do have to be signed by Congress. The USMCA was ratified by Congress. It's not clear to me legally how the president can undo a free trade agreement that was, in fact, passed by Congress. He negotiated it during his first administration, but in order to actually get it put into place, Congress had to be involved as well. Um, and yeah, kind of, as a corollary or to that or a related point, I mean, we're still very much up in the air as to whether any of this stuff is legal at all. Uh, the tariffs, there's several lawsuits involving the tariffs. We have oral arguments coming up on Thursday, in fact, in the case involving the Liberation Day tariffs and the fentanyl-related tariffs on Canada and Mexico and China. The first round involving in that case went against the president.
Right.
And I think a lot of analysts are looking at this and seeing, it's perhaps more likely than not that all of these tariffs are going to get struck down. What that's going to mean for any of these deals, I have no idea. My take is that deals are going to have to the extent that the president wants to negotiate
Hmm.
trade deals with other countries and regions, if that's the way these court cases pan out, he's going to have to get Congress involved.
Hmm.
It's not clear to me that Congress is going to look too favorably on uh, any kind of deal that involves fairly high tariffs on Canada or Mexico, to
Yeah.
be quite honest.
You're right. It's an important point. There's going to be court cases. There's a lot of politics here. Um, let's just spend our remaining time together, though, focusing a bit on how the Big Beautiful Bill Act, this was the large tax cuts and significant additional government spending that was passed through the Congress on July 4th, sets the United States up for the potential of some kind of fiscal crisis. I mean, you look at the numbers, Joseph, they're staggering. Social Security, one of the key entitlement programs of the U.S., as early as 2032, 7 years from now, will be unable to pay benefits greater than three-quarters of what Americans are entitled to right now. So, Joseph, do you buy the contention that Trump and his administration are in part trying to solve for the United States' fiscal woes through tariffs? That tariffs are more than about reshoring. They're more than about dealing with irritants around dairy or lumber or, with Europe around pharmaceuticals. That for the first time in a long time, we have a U.S. administration who is linking trade policy to fiscal policy. And this is a big part of what they're trying to accomplish.
I think that's possible. Certainly that is one of the motives for levying tariffs that have been put out there by representatives of the Trump administration. Uh, I think it's, going ahead, looking to the future, I think that's likely to be the only, perhaps, or at least um, the biggest kind of benefit to the U.S. going forward is going to be the tariff revenue. I mean, the other main stated goal, as you mentioned, was reshoring or, boosting in manufacturing employment, those kinds of things. I see those two kinds of goals as being more or less in opposition to one another. The more revenue you bring in, that you want to bring in, rather, that kind of requires that you're maintaining a substantial amount of trade with, the
Mm-hmm.
countries that you're levying tariffs on. The more you kind of reallocate towards domestic production, the less tariff revenue you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to see both of those goals achieved simultaneously. But I think it's undeniable that with the unsustainable position that the U.S. government is in terms of its spending and tax revenue going forward in the next couple of years and decades, it's going to be very difficult to see how all these other provisions of that bill could possibly be sustained without some kind of meaningful tariff revenue.
Yeah. Final question. I know as an economist, you think a lot about the two things that we like to joke about are inevitable: death and taxes. We'll leave death for another day, but tariffs and taxes is kind of interesting to the extent, Joseph, that this is a tax, is it not, on American consumers? And yet here is a president, a conservative president, a Republican president, a MAGA president, who's somehow either out of, Machiavellian genius or a kind of idiot savant's understanding of the intersection of politics and economics, has managed to convince the most conservative Americans that paying this tax is good. It's good for them. It's good for America, and we should have more tariff taxes. This to me just it seems like a world upside down.
It's funny that you say that. Everything that I've read in terms of surveys of Americans, in terms of how they think about tariffs and, in fact, many of the president's other economic policies, they're not too fond of them. Something between two-thirds and three-quarters of Americans do not approve
Hmm.
of President Trump's tariff policy in general. I think the exception to that is if you ask them specifically about tariffs on China, they're more positive on that. But tariffs on Canada, especially if you drill down on something like that question, the vast majority of Americans disapprove of tariffs. And so I don't think it's actually true that he has convinced, most of the country and even most people in his party that tariffs are good. I think his approval ratings on economic policy more generally have been declining steadily over the course of the second administration, especially when it comes to inflation, where he was actually, uh, when he started the second administration in quite a positive position in terms of his approval on
Hmm.
inflation, but that has deteriorated quite substantially.
Hmm.
And so I don't actually think that that's true. I think that most Americans do look at this and they don't see this as a positive for the country. They do see this quite rightly as a tax that they are going to pay and have, in fact, already started to pay. If you kind of look through the data and look at, how, consumer goods prices, especially those that are exposed to tariffs, are evolving relative to other prices in the economy, we're seeing that upward trajectory start to take hold. And I don't think consumers are going to be positive when it comes to that.
Yeah. Final question, Joseph. Inflation. One of the early whacks against Trump's tariffs back in April was a worry on the part of many economists that this would cause a bump up, possibly a surge in inflation. We haven't seen that yet. We saw a small tick up in the core CPI in the United States last month, but it was a small one. Is this still, talking to your fellow economists, is this still something that is wait and see, or is there something surprising here? Are the tariffs not showing up to the extent that we might have reasonably expected just a few months ago?
I don't think if you talk to any other economists, I don't think any of us would have expected to see a huge increase in inflation, or to be more precise, in the price level uh, already at this point. I don't think any of us would have really expected to see much in the way of other kinds of economic effects as well, especially when you look at what happened after April 2nd, the Liberation Day announcement, huge, front loading of imports to get ahead of those tariffs. There was lots of front loading even earlier in the year when it comes to, trade between Canada and China and the United States. And so companies have built up a big stock of tariff-free imported inventories that they are,
Right.
they're winding down now. Especially in light of that, it's going to take some time. Trade, when it comes to trade, we're not going to see immediate effects across most of the economy. It's a slow grind. It's going to be a slow grind downwards in terms of the trajectory of the US economy, a slow grind downwards in terms of the growth rate, a slow grind upwards in terms of uh, you know, prices, especially the prices of imported products, but also the prices of products that are produced
Yeah.
domestically that use imported materials.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to manufacturing, automotive stuff, the big three automakers, they're getting hit by these steel and aluminum tariffs hard. And the prices of the vehicles that they produce are eventually going to have to start going up.
Yeah.
But again, it's going to take some time. This isn't something that we should expect to see happen overnight as a result of these deals. We're not going to see a surge in inflation over the course of the next month or quarter.
Joseph Steinberg, thank you so much, always, for your considered analysis and insights. We really appreciate your contributions to the Hub. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
That was Joseph Steinberg, professor at the University of Toronto, where he studies economics, trade, and everything else that seems top of mind this week. Well, thank you for tuning in to this edition of Hub Hits. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, please jump on our YouTube channel and give us a little subscribe. Click on the notification bell. You get the next Hub Hit sent to you as soon as it's published. And if you're over on our podcast channel, well, we'd love your reviews and input. Please get down in that review section. Tell us what you think of Hub Podcasts. We read all of our reviews carefully. I'm Rudyard Griffiths. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.